Hi, thank you. I'm glad that my friend Dane is next to me because I don't know very much about you, but I've heard your name perhaps millions of times. I'm running for Congress here in.
You're not going to ask me for money, are you? Because
yeah,
that's
well,
usually the sentence that comes after that.
Just 5 minutes after the meeting here. No, but I'm curious about this idea of being negative versus being positive.
Love
idea
this question.
of defining your opponent, and in my case, my opponent is being investigated by 4 agencies, including Robert Mueller, and every day I wake up wanting to be positive and wanting to define my vision, value, mission, and who I really am against somebody who clearly is beleaguered.
Got it.
Help me.
These are great questions. So I need to explain something to most people, which is we see so many billions of dollars of political marketing that we believe we need to market like politicians. Now, you are a politician, so we're going to leave that aside for a second. The biggest difference between political marketers and everyone else is political marketing is the only marketing where you got to get more than half. And that changes everything. Like, my wife owns a chain of gluten-free bakeries. Almost no one in the world has had her stuff. That's fine. She's still the biggest gluten-free bakery in the East Coast because you don't need that many people to have a business. So most of us need to think about the fact that a majority is an illusion. You're in a different situation. So here's what happened. In 1961, some consultants figured out that the single easiest way to win an election is to get your opponent's supporters to not vote. And the reason, if we look at the tenor of American politics as well as voter attendance, is TV ads are really effective at getting your opponent's supporters to not show up. So we have this anti-democratic thing going on for my entire lifetime of trying to make that happen. However, there are really profound counterexamples that show that if you can earn the trust and attention of just a small percentage of the people, not only will they eagerly show up, they will bring their friends. And that is how Barack Obama got elected twice. If you think about the odds that were against a black man who was a neophyte, who was bucking his own establishment to win twice, he didn't do it by being better at getting the other side to not show up. He did it by creating an environment where people, well, Marshall Gans was one of his teachers. Marshall Gans is a professor at Harvard. He worked with Cesar Chavez all the way up till today. Marshall has a 3-step process. Here it is. And it works for everybody, not just politicians. Story of self, which means testify. Why are you here? Story of us, meaning why is my story your story? That's the hardest part. And then story of now. Why should you care today, not tomorrow? And Marshall, in his trainings, which I've taken, demonstrates this with how effective the gay marriage movement was. Because the gay marriage movement was built on those 3 steps. It was not a political movement. In fact, you can track everything in politics that happened associated with gay marriage happened exactly 9 years after the cultural thing happened. And that's true with almost there are exceptions, but with almost everything that happens in politics, it happens 9 or 10 years after the culture shifts. So your job as a politician who wants to change something, who doesn't have more money, right, and can't just depress the other side, is to figure out story of self, story of us, story of now. Earn permission to talk to people. And this is the reason I have a fairly well-thought answer to this is Congress people call me on the phone all the time. And what I say to them is, I can give you advice that's worth more than the money you're asking me for. If you read these 3 books, I'll give it to you. And then I send them the 3 books, and they never call me back. One congressman in 15 in the last year has called me back. And because the consultants say, no, you have this much money you have to raise today. Why do they say that? Because they get a percentage of it, and that's what they do for a living. The alternative is say, how would I run if I had no money? And the answer is, I would earn permission to email people who want to hear from me on a regular basis to educate them in a way that they can convert their friends. That costs 0. And if you can do that and do that and do that, you will win in a landslide if you are in the right district and your story resonates, right? And that shift is slowly happening in American politics. And the last thing I'll say about politics is cable TV understands that you are not the customer, you are the product. You are the product that they sell to the advertiser. So the purpose of cable TV is not to tell you the truth. The purpose of cable TV is to make you panicked or angry so you will watch more. And so the truth of our culture and who we are as a people is not reflected in what we see on cable TV. And the job that each of us have if we want to heal our culture is not to do it necessarily in an annual march, but to do it over lunch, one person at a time, 3 people at a time, 5 people at a time. And the biggest marketing lesson I will share with you tonight is 7 words. People like us do things like this. And that is what the definition of culture is, right? So Chelsea and her partner are here. They make the most beautiful stationery in America. It's not for everybody. It's for almost nobody. But the people it's for are people who know that when they send out a thank you note on this letterhead or a wedding invitation, it will go to people who say, oh, you're people like me, because people like us buy stuff like this. And the same thing's true when you're selling real estate, and the same thing's true when we're trying to run for something. So the opportunity here is not to be a beleaguerer and not to shame another human, but in fact to shame behavior and to say people like us don't stand for behavior like this from you or from me or from anybody else. And that's an identity thing. That's story of us. That's not story of him. And going back to that again and again and investing your effort in how you can tell that narrative in a way that doesn't get lost in the noise, because the daily poll numbers are not nearly as important as the long-term arc of what each of us are trying to do.